Hello everyone. Today I thought I would talk about the remedy Carcinosin and break it down into themes using a mind map. So let me just bring up the mind map. Here we go. So here we have several themes of carcinosin. So if we take the individual themes one at a time, we can see here, we can see ailments from control, domination, and abuse. So what we have here is someone who can often feel forsaken or unloved, living in an environment where they're not really taken care of, and they can be very dominated or controlled. This can lead to feelings of being neglected, and sometimes the neglect or the control can lead to too much responsibility. So picture a young child who perhaps is left to look after his or her siblings. So from a very young age, the parents have either gone to work or they've just decided that the child should be the main caregiver. And so they're given too much responsibility. And they can end up, as a result, being very dutiful, feeling that it's all upon their shoulders, that they must take care of everybody. And alongside that duty, then there's often the feeling of guilt. When you have duties and you're not performing them, then often you have the feeling of guilt. Going back to control and domination and abuse, one of the survival strategies is obedience. And in becoming obedient, in turn, that means they suppress, there's suppression of the self. They desire to please the others, i.e. the people who are controlling them often, and they mold to them because it's a great survival strategy to make sure that they're not hurt or to make sure that they're not shouted at. So they develop very strong self-control. They often in a family can become the martyr or the scapegoat. And often what you might find is that they have severe education, they're very strict parents perhaps who've plotted out a path in life for them that they have to adhere to. And that can then create, again, the desire to please, but also they can become very sort of perfectionist because in order to achieve the targets and the grades that are needed by their families or their parents or their sort of main carers, they have to strive very hard. So perfectionism often follows, and that feeling of never good enough can often result. With ailments from control and domination, you often also see that they may be shouted at, they may be criticized heavily. And so you find that they're very sensitive individuals, particularly to reprimand and criticism. And the sensitivity goes to more areas. So they can be very sensitive to music. And we see the keynote symptom of carcinosin, which is ameliorated by dancing and love of dancing. They love nature and animals. They're very sensitive to animals and also, in turn, very sympathetic and very sensitive to injustice or suffering. So they may take on causes, a bit like causticum. They, again, another keynote symptom, cheerful in thunderstorms, you can see. So they're very sensitive to the weather. And they can actually be worse or better for thunderstorms, and they're often worse for damp weather. The sensitivity extends to areas like noise. They can be sensitive to noise. They can be fairly romantic and sentimental individuals, and often they can be highly affected by emotions. So we go on and we can see another reaction, another type of reaction from the domination or the control is disobedience. So once where we had obedience, which led to suppression of self, we now have disobedience. So here we can have, and you often get carcinosin children that can have destructive outbursts, refusal of authority, any authority, school authority or parental authority, and there's rebellion. The children can be restless, and in that restlessness, you can often see the idea of difficult concentration, and this is where carcinosin can sometimes be helpful in ADHD. They can have tics, and also the restlessness is also in that kind of tubercular spirit of desiring to travel and move around. Through the restlessness as well, we see one of the keynote symptoms. We can see insomnia and sleep. It's a big aspect within carcinosin. They often have chronic insomnia, even in babies. They like to sleep, as young children, often in the knee-chest position, similar to tuberculinum. And they often wake up at 4 a.m. with thoughts and busy mind. They're often much better for short naps. Going back to the ailments from control and domination and abuse, that can also create a huge amount of anxiety, especially in a young child. Imagine a child, and if you've read my story on carcinosin, there's the idea that the child waits for the parents and he's not sure what's going to happen next, whether they're going to get shouted at or whether they're going to get hit. And so that can create anticipation and huge levels of anxiety. So there you see an extension where they can bite their nails and their fingers. The anxiety goes to their stomach, so they have stomach symptoms from the kind of anticipation. They can also develop anxiety about the health of their loved ones. And moving on finally to the general keynotes of carcinosin, what we have is often a warm-blooded individual, and their keynote cravings, you often hear about, craving spoonfuls of butter. They love chocolate. They love eggs, or they can dislike them. They love salt, and they often like foods that make them feel worse in some ways. It has an affinity to the sinus area, and they can often suffer from frequent colds and sinusitis. Constipation can be present, and sometimes it's very obstinate constipation and chronic. Even young babies with constipation can sometimes be helped by carcinosin. Webster, he often saw cases of a sort of cafe au lait skin and the blue sclera around the eyes. They can suffer from acne and moles. There's often a family history of cancer in a carcinosin individual. And often, if you see a case where they've never been well since mononucleosis, glandular fever, then carcinosin can often help to clear that. So here you can see different themes, just to recap. You can see the different themes of a carcinosin individual. You've got a history here of control, domination, abuse, and a child who's often had too much responsibility, great sensitivity. They often suppress themselves to mold to others, and they have strong self-control. Anxiety plays a big part, particularly anticipation. They can be great perfectionists and often fastidious. And the rebellion is the opposite side of the coin, where they can become destructive and refuse parental authority. They become restless. Often sleep and insomnia is a keynote. And then, as I've said, we have the generals and the keynotes. So I hope this has been useful in describing the various themes of carcinosin. Let me know in the comments. And if you like learning in this way, then please do join my Facebook group. It's written down at the bottom, Homeopathic Remedy Study, or you can search on Sunita's Remedy Study group. Thank you for listening.